We're diving into the dramatic story of John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil. And this deep dive, it's not just a historical recap.
Right.
We're treating the company less like a defunct trust and more like a colossal, uncomfortable mirror.
That's a great way to put it. It's the ultimate case study in contradiction.
Yeah.
You shared sources that frame this as the killing of the dragon, but the real tension is this.
What is that?
How could the leaders of Standard Oil genuinely see themselves as America's greatest builders, bringing order and efficiency to this, chaotic industry?
Well, at the very same time, the public saw them as nothing more than a greedy, cruel dragon that had to be slain.
Exactly. That's the whole thing.
That paradox is really our mission today. We aren't just looking at the date Standard Oil was dissolved in 1911. We're using the rise and fall to pull out principles that, frankly, apply today.
Yeah.
How does centralized power grow so large that it starts to influence law, media, public consciousness? And what happens when a society tries to fight a system that, ironically, helped create a lot of its modern conveniences?
And that's the key. Standard Oil was sort of the inevitable outcome of early industrial capitalism, a system that is literally designed to reward efficiency, scale, and control of the entire value chain.
Right.
The danger wasn't just its market control, it was the element of self-deception.
Right.
They operated under this sincere belief that maximizing their profit was, that it was the same thing as maximizing the national welfare.
That blurring of interest and altruism, that's what makes it so dangerous.
That's the scary part of unchecked power.
So let's just unpack the scale for a second. Standard Oil was the physical embodiment of this huge shift in the U.S. economy, right? Moving from these scattered small businesses to the era of the industrial giant, the trust.
Oh, completely. They didn't just refine oil. They dominated every single step, from transport and pipelines to distribution, and even the financing need to run the whole sector.
And when you look at the sources, Rockefeller's internal justification, it was rooted in the absolute chaos of the early oil fields.
Utter chaos. Before Standard Oil, crude oil prices would swing wildly. I mean, we're talking $20 a barrel one week and then 10 cents the next.
10 cents. That's unbelievable.
It destroyed investment. It created immense waste. So Rockefeller's goal was to stabilize the market.
And he did. He absolutely did stabilize it. The argument from inside the company was clear. They optimized the system, they reduced waste, and crucially, they lowered the cost of kerosene and other products for the average American.
In their minds, they were the greatest builders of America because they brought order where there was just, instability.
But that order came at a huge cost. The public quickly figured out that while the trust delivered cheaper oil, they also delivered these ruthless tactics to maintain control.
So Standard Oil became viewed as secretive, manipulative, and accountable to absolutely no one. They crushed rivals not just through efficiency, but through sabotage, intimidation, and that legendary control they had over railroad rebates.
And that's the really surprising detail that sticks with you. While people absolutely hated the trusts, they hated that feeling of being controlled by these unseen forces. So many benefits of modern industrial life.
Like lighting your home or
fueling early transportation, right? All of that advanced because of the incredible scale and efficiency the dragon had created.
And this brings us to a core conceptual point. The analysis here isn't really about judging Rockefeller's morality. It's about understanding the system he was operating in.
The framework itself.
Exactly. The economic framework naturally rewards scaling up and controlling the supply chain. That inevitably leads to centralization. And that is principle number one. Power always centralizes, then recoils.
So Standard Oil was the logical product of its time.
It was, but once that power becomes so centralized that it threatens the societal balance, society's immune system eventually kicks in to force a correction.
And when that correction started to happen, the dragon fought back with every single tool it had.
Yeah.
When states tried to challenge them with early antitrust violations, the company's response wasn't just some simple legal defense, was it?
Not at all. They leveraged wealth for political power. They hired the most expensive, most skilled lawyers in the entire nation. The sources detailed these instances where they actually retained sitting U.S. senators as their legal advisors.
Wait, sitting senators?
Yes. This wasn't just about winning a case. It was about ensuring the entire political and legal environment was tilted in their favor.
So you mentioned that Rockefeller genuinely saw himself as a builder. How did they rationalize these ruthless tactics, the political influence, crushing competitors with that self-image?
Well, they saw it as protecting the efficiency they had built. They viewed
Oh.
independent competitors not as fellow entrepreneurs, but as destabilizing forces, as people who would reintroduce the chaos they had worked so hard to eliminate,
And that belief, I assume, is what justified their massive deception campaign.
which is where the blind tiger companies come in.
Okay, this part is truly fascinating because it just shows the lengths they went to create the illusion of a functioning competitive market.
It does. These blind tiger companies, like Republic Oil, they would literally hang signs saying, "No trusts, no monopoly." They looked like these small, independent operations.
They were promoting themselves as the good guys fighting the trusts.
Exactly. But what the sources reveal is that these companies were secretly reporting all their sales, all their costs, all their strategic information directly back to 26 Broadway, the Standard Oil headquarters.
Just imagine being a genuine rival trying to compete with Republic Oil. You think you're up against an independent startup.
And you're actually fighting the ghost of the Standard Oil empire, backed by limitless resources.
The frustration for state regulators and attorneys general must have been immense. They weren't fighting a single entity.
No, they were fighting a hydra. And it just shows the incredible resilience of entrenched wealth. Take Texas, for example. They were particularly aggressive in trying to revoke charters and auction off subsidiary assets.
And what happened?
Standard Oil agents just showed up and bought the assets back under new corporate names. The sources noted that the dragon didn't die. It just shed its skin and changed its scales.
So purely legal challenges, they really struggled.
They did. Because money and power can always adapt faster than the legal system can move or, rewrite the rules.
So if the legal system couldn't really penetrate all that evasion and secrecy, what finally broke the system open?
Well, massive structures like that always leave a trail of breadcrumbs. And once the system chose secrecy over transparency, it opened itself up to a different kind of challenge. Public opinion.
And that's where the killer with a pen comes in.
Exactly.
We have to talk about Ida Tarbell. She was really the one who lifted the veil and exposed the system from the inside out. Her personal background here is just so crucial.
It is. She came from the oil region in Pennsylvania, where her father and her brother were both ruined by Standard Oil's tactics. So for her, this wasn't just a journalistic pursuit.
No, it was personal. It was a quest for justice fueled by personal injury.
And she transformed that injury into this methodical, decade-long investigative reporting. She spent years dissecting public records and, remarkably, managed to gain access to an insider.
H.H. Rogers.
One of those powerful figures in Standard. And Rogers, he was so convinced he could charm her, he thought he was helping her write a more, balanced story.
That must have been the ultimate journalistic coup. Instead, her 24-month investigative series, which later became the book The History of Standard Oil Company, it was a moral and political bombshell.
It exposed the specific details of the schemes, the railroad manipulations, the sabotage, the network of espionage they used to track and destroy rivals. It wasn't abstract talk about trusts anymore.
Right, it was specific dates, names, methods. This wasn't a policy paper. It was a compelling, infuriating story that mobilized the public.
And that public awakening is what gave the government the momentum for its decisive move. The antitrust movement gained this national force, and it was personified by President Theodore Roosevelt.
The trust buster.
The trustbuster himself. Now, we should remember, Roosevelt wasn't against large corporations in principle. He really tried to distinguish between good trusts and bad trusts.
And Standard Oil was?
The clearest example of the bad.
So the federal government finally sues Standard Oil under the Schuman Act, and the sheer scale of that prosecution alone tells you how serious this was.
It was huge. 444 witnesses, over 1,000 exhibits, and almost 15,000 pages of documents?
Yeah, 14,495 pages.
Yeah.
It was this monumental indictment that the prosecution called the greatest economic crime in America.
And the climax, of course, was the Supreme Court ruling. This was a societal reckoning, a judicial stamp on all that public frustration. The court ruled that Standard Oil, it must be dissolved. It was an unreasonable restraint of trade.
The dragon had to be cut into many pieces.
That was the order.
So the dragon is officially dead, the rule of law prevailed, and justice was served. Or so the formal history tells us.
Right.
But the ultimate unforeseen twist of this entire saga is that killing the dragon somehow made its owner richer.
And this is where the structural reality just completely diverges from the formal victory. Standard Oil was broken up into roughly 34 separate companies.
The core of what would become major players like Exxon, Mobil, Chevron.
Exactly. Standard New Jersey became Exxon, Standard New York became Mobil, California Standard became Chevron, and so on.
Okay, and for Rockefeller, who owned about a quarter of the stock in the original giant company, the court gave him equivalent shares in all 34 of the new independent companies.
That's right.
So what happened to the value of those stocks once they were finally free to compete?
The market went absolutely wild. Freed from the constraints of being this one massive, heavily scrutinized company, and with new regional management incentivized to compete aggressively,
Yeah.
the separate stocks just soared.
Within 1 year, the collective value of those shares nearly doubled. Some of them tripled.
And the startling result, Rockefeller's personal fortune skyrocketed. It went to about $900 million at the time, which is, equivalent to hundreds of billions today.
So they killed the corporate structure, and the Dragon's owner became exponentially richer.
And what's so fascinating here is that this outcome forces us to look beyond just the formal legal victory. We changed the sign on the door, we removed the single monopolistic board.
But the underlying engine, the core market logic that rewards aggressive growth and expansion,
That was left completely untouched.
which really highlights the crucial difference between changing the external form and, enacting fundamental structural change.
Yes, dissolution achieved its goal of breaking the monopoly, but it also resulted in 34 companies designed for growth, now legally operating without that political target on their backs.
Which leads us to principle number 2. Killing the external dragon isn't enough if the internal logic remains.
The system simply produced a brood of smaller, more nimble dragons, and Rockefeller maintained his ownership across the entire new system. If that internal mechanism that rewards aggressive, expansive control is left unchanged.
The dragon just changes the color of its scales.
That's it.
And this brings us to the most personal lesson, and the reason we call this whole story a mirror. And that's principle number 3. The real dragon is within us. Standard Oil is a giant reflection of human ambition, of the human need for control, for efficiency.
And everyone in this drama, they all believed they were the hero. Rockefeller saw himself as bringing order. Ida Tarbell saw herself as pursuing justice. Theodore Roosevelt saw himself as protecting society from revolution.
The deepest dragon, the most resilient one, is the self-deception that allows us to believe our own actions are always justified, always necessary, and always on the right side.
It forces you to ask some uncomfortable questions.
Right. Why do we fear a monopoly when we desire total, secure control in our own lives, in our careers, in our financial niches? Why do we only hate power when it's not in our hands?
And that's it. True wisdom begins when you recognize that shadow in yourself. The ambition, the need to control, the fear of being left behind. That recognition is the first step.
The ultimate lesson from Standard Oil seems to be that power, no matter how efficiently it's wielded, requires transparency and accountability.
Absolutely. The second, any institution or, any individual believes it's unbeatable and refuses questioning or criticism.
It has sown the seeds of its own necessary downfall.
Which means that true dissolution has to be internal. It means imposing limits on ourselves when we gain power and choosing to act with wisdom and perspective, not just ambition and necessity.
We've seen that the Supreme Court's ruling was only part of the story. The more important verdict in the Standard Oil case is the one passed by conscience, by society, and by long-term historical impact.
Which is why we want to leave you with this provocative thought, reflecting on what we learned today.
If everything you currently rely on for power and security, your habits, your reputation, your career control, if all of it were forced to dissolve tomorrow,
What quality of life, what intellect or spirit would you have left to start over without collapsing?
So what does this all mean? True dragon slaying isn't about destroying strength. It's about placing that strength under the intense light of wisdom and conscience.
Only then does power stop being a weapon of control and start becoming a constructive tool.